Hello, and thank you for joining us today as we celebrate the 20th anniversary of Epiphany. It's kind of hard to believe it's 20 years. It doesn't seem that long, but quite an accomplishment, I would say. This is the man who was the vision behind the whole of the project, Eli Parker. And my name's Tim Snider, president of the winery, and happy to be with you here today to talk a little bit about, think back and celebrate a little bit of 20 years of a real accomplishment. When I think about the origins of Epiphany, I remember a couple things specifically, but I'd like to hear kind of what your memories are of Epiphany.
Well, geez, I'm getting to a point now where 20 years, I'm getting kind of aged. I don't know if I can remember that far back, to be honest with you. I don't think I had any gray hair back then.
No, me neither.
I was at an early point in my wine education career just struck by Rhone varietals specifically, and I had an opportunity to travel a little bit, spent some time in the Rhone Valley and in Australia, and just really fell in love with Syrah and Grenache Blanc. And we were making a lot of those varieties. Well, I shouldn't say a lot of them. In the early days, we basically had Syrah and Viognier.
Yeah.
That's kind of where we started, but my passion for expanding that portfolio started to grow in the mid and late 90s, and shortly after my dad, Tim's father-in-law, purchased Camp 4 in the St. Ynez Valley. We had an opportunity to expand the Rhone holdings in the vineyard, and that's really where things started to take off. We were doing a lot of experimentation in the cellar and had some great new varieties to experiment with, and Epiphany was just sort of born out of that experimentation and expansion of the Rhone portfolio.
Yeah, I remember you talking about all of these different, more esoteric Rhone varieties that were in the ground and coming online, and you were super excited about working with them in very small, limited quantities, but a lot, like you said, a lot of experimentation. And the program really just sort of evolved. It took on a life of its own, with a real discovery element, as I recall. Especially for me, I wasn't familiar back then with even all of these different grapes. And what's interesting is we were talking about how, prior to this, how many of them actually, the experiments ended up pulling forward and are still part of the program today.
It's really neat to see how the Epiphany label has evolved. We started with, in the sort of earliest years of Epiphany, basically a red Rhone blend that we're going to have an opportunity to try here in a little bit. Obviously we had some blending components for that, but we slowly started to expand and added things like Counois and Cinsault and Carignan, and on the white side a little bit of Grenache Blanc and Roussanne, and that really allowed us to the building blocks to experiment with some really fun and interesting blends that still to this day are kind of the backbone of the Epiphany program.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another thing that's been really rewarding over the years as the program continues to develop is, well, the majority of this in the early days was sourced from Camp 4 vineyard, which was a great vineyard that you all planted, and we still use fruit from Camp 4. I think what's been interesting is that we've moved a lot of these varieties over to Rodney's vineyard, and as Rodney's vineyard has grown and developed, and there's opportunities for some grafting and redevelopment in Rodney's vineyard. We've put some of these varieties on the home ranch right now, and I think there's just something that's pretty special about how Epiphany has become more and more rooted to the home ranch, the first vineyard that you and Ashley and your folks planted. And to me, there's sort of a full circle here, where this program is now very much Rodney's vineyard dominant, and frankly, I think the fruit quality continues to just get better and better and better as it goes.
Well, I think Camp 4 was a great spot, but I have to say, in all honesty, I think Rodney's is a bit superior just in terms of soil and climate. It's just a skosh less, is that probably grammatically less hot?
Sure.
And so, you know, we're able to sort of maintain and achieve great juice chemistries. And, you know, at the end of the day, that's pretty much what it's all about. You've got to have good fruit to make good wine, and Rodney's is a great place for growing, you know, amazing quality fruit.
Absolutely. Well, in celebration of 20 years, we are going to be, we are releasing several mini verticals of some of our favorite wines. Revelation, Petite Sirah from Rodney's Vineyard, and then going off the ranch and reviewing Syrahs from Vineyard, just a wonderful vineyard in Santa Maria Valley. So we're glad that you're going to come along with us as we explore these mini verticals. Thanks so much for sticking with us. We hope that you're going to be around as we continue the next 20 years. Cheers.
Cheers to that.
We are now going to jump into a flight that is not for the faint of heart. Petite Sirah has become a mainstay of the Epiphany lineup. This is all coming from our Rodney's Vineyard, the estate ranch. And these wines, as you probably well know, pack a punch. They definitely have color and tannin and structure, but they've really also become one of the favorites in the Epiphany lineup and one of our best sellers in the tasting room. We're going to taste the 2012 vintage, the 2013 and 2014 vintages. You can blame me. We didn't put enough wine away into our library in the early years to be able to really go back. We still have bits and pieces, but it was about 2010 to 2012 that we started really stashing some away to have quantities to re-release like this. But what I'd like to talk about first is Rodney's Vineyard and the Petite Sirah, the clonal selections, the planting. And you were telling me, Eli, that you weren't necessarily completely sold on Petite Sirah back at the beginning.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. Actually, one of our former winemakers had a real passion for Petite Sirah and was constantly trying to twist my arm to plant a few acres. I think principally because he was interested in it for a little label that he was working on at the time. And I finally agreed to put a little bit of fruit in at Rodney's Vineyard. And it was through a mutual acquaintance that I met, actually through our winemaker's mutual acquaintance that I met a gentleman named Jeff Cohn from JC Cellars, who helped us source some amazing cuttings from Palisades and Rockpile vineyards up in Northern California. And actually, looking back now, I'm really glad that we made the decision to plant the Petite, because it's, you were commenting, you know, I think in Santa Barbara it's not widely planted. There are many that have tried it. I think we're probably one of a couple locations that actually have, you know, success regularly with the growing and producing of the Petite. It's not an easy grape to grow. It can be prone to bunch rot, and it's a little persnickety out there depending on the year. Just have to be real meticulous with your kind of growing regimen. But this wine is stunning, and for those of you that like to have to scrub your teeth for 20 minutes after drinking Petite, well, this will be the wine for you.
Absolutely. I thought it was interesting that you said that it was a difficult grape to grow, because that didn't really dawn on me. You know, it's a thick-skinned grape, and obviously that's what gives us a lot of the color and tannin to these wines. But the other thing, you know, just before we get off it, that's interesting is, you know, when you talk about Palisades and Rockpile up in Northern California, both of those are also phenomenal Zinfandel vineyards, and you were kind of making the connection between Petite Sirah and Zinfandel in that regard. So, yeah, I think that's pretty interesting. Tell me what you think about these wines. We have 3 great vintages here, and you know, this Rodney's Vineyard, I think, has really separated itself from many in terms of the quality that we get. But talk about these vintages.
Well, I have to say, honestly, I mean, this 2012, literally, to me, I mean, it seems tasting's so youthful and so much fruit, and it's just
Yeah.
like an unctuous wine,
Yeah.
and really nicely balanced. It's just, really drinking beautifully.
So one of the things too that, to build on that, and I think the 13 shows this exceptionally well as also, is you get, they're actually, for Petite Sirah, and as much power as that grape has and these wines have, there's actually an interesting, almost feminine floral quality in the aromatics to these. I think the 13 definitely shows that, but these are still very well balanced.
Get a little of that violet,
Yeah.
kind of just, people would have a tendency to think that, or maybe you've had the experience with Petite, that it's, super astringent and, kind of mouth-drying. These wines are just, again, balanced, fruit-forward, floral, but not in an overt way, kind of like, to your point, a little more on the feminine end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
And pretty amazing.
Yeah. I've always liked the fact that our Petite Sirahs have really good natural acidity, which adds to that balance that you're talking about. I've had some Petite Sirahs from warmer growing regions that frankly are that, just take the enamel off your teeth, overpowering, almost too much. And I think that these they drink well, but they also really work well with food. And I think if you're talking about, we were talking about big green eggs and grills earlier, and I think if you're bringing some red meat or game off of that with these, you're putting it together. What do you think? We've been talking a little bit in this series of re-releases, ageability.
Well, with this Petite, tasting that 2012, I think you could probably squirrel that one away for another 10 years and it'd probably be an amazing wine. It's literally, it tastes like it was just released. Yeah,
it really does. And the Rodney's Vineyard in the Fest Parker line, we've gone back and had the privilege of tasting wines, Syrah, not Petite Sirah, but Syrah from this very vineyard, the block next to it, basically. They're going 20 years and still have some life. You got to think that the Petite Sirah's got that in it.
Well, one of the things, that you've probably heard us mention if you've tasted through the Revelation and the Syrah and ultimately come to the Petite Sirah, we're constantly talking about, acidity and balance, and the common thread through all of these wines is, a great site and a great climate that creates that balance and acidity, and we're just really blessed to have the ability to work with fruit from Rodney's.
Amen. And I will say this, I am glad that you were talked into planning Petite Sirah out at Rodney's, because this has become one of my personal favorites. And we hope that you all enjoy it too. Thanks for spending a little time with us, sticking with us for our first 20 years. We look forward to many more. Well done, sir.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers.